let's talk about Cooper Kupp in Dynasty.
Do you have the time to listen to me grind? Take down the film watchers and nerds all at once.
Okay, so it's not just Cooper Kupp. It's all the players, especially wide receivers, in season when everyone should know if they're a top 5 team or not. It happens every year. It's something you can look for every year, and so I think it's a good subject for a weekly video. You know, it's something that I think you can carry forward. Not that you can execute on it or any of the things I say, but I can tell you some things that are repeatedly true and worth trying or at least keeping in mind. So, what we talked about last week was how the age curve is essentially fiction. It's a misbehaving truth, right? Nothing about a player's performance this year indicates that they are going to be worse in performance or even production next year. It's better to evaluate the individual player. Their efficiency or their production or their age itself does not indicate they're about to fall off the cliff, but they do become an increasingly risky candidate to actually hit that cliff. And if they get injured, like Cooper Kupp, you're immediately in a bit of a value crunch. So the first thing I want to note is that if you have Cooper Kupp on your roster and you're not a top 5 team already, that's something you should remember. Identify if you're a top 5 team as early as you feel comfortable, but as early as possible. And as we were talking about this season, in this weekly video thing that I've been doing, I try for week 3, but by week 5, I definitely want to make a decision about whether I'm going up, whether I'm going down. And if you have someone like Cooper Kupp or Devontae Adams is currently still producing, then he is also in this group. If you're a non-competitive team and you might not be able to get them, and that's the part I find missing from a lot of Dynasty content, you might not be able to get anything done, but you should have been trying to trade them to teams that do think they're top 5, to give them those points, because in season points exist and in the non-point season, hence its name, they don't exist. Telling you what exact trade to do is almost impossible from a generic standpoint, although I get we try to do that a lot. And I'm predicting the future, we're trying to hit over 50%. What I can hit at a lot higher rate, and what you can hit at a lot higher rate, and this is why Louis Pasiga from the DLF family is always talking about making notes and learning about your league mates, because we actually play in these very small leagues, but we talk about it in a very broad industry. And knowing the tendencies of your league mates and knowing the tendencies of knowing the tendencies of the group, let alone your individual league, it's actually relatively consistent and relatively easy to do. Even from this distance, you can trade away points that don't matter and don't happen in the off season when right now they do matter to someone. That's an extra source of something that we call value that you can use in season. And that's why it's important to know where your team is at and which direction you're going, because I don't want to assume that my league mates are going to make mistakes every year in order to improve my team or improve my chances of winning. Alright, what does that mean in terms of Cooper Kupp and all wide receivers? If you're not a non-competitive team, you should note now, next time you find yourself in that situation, you should be trying to trade players that are productive, and not just if they're old, and not just if they're young, and not just if you don't like them. If they are scoring points, they are worth more in season than in the off season, theoretically. And again, you're not always going to find it possible. Right now, a young player scoring points is Jalen Waddle. I have him on most of my rosters. And so one of my ideas and teams where I'm not winning is trade Jalen Waddle for CeeDee Lamb, because Jalen Waddle's giving you points, CeeDee Lamb isn't, but they're both similar age young players, and maybe I'll get a plus. Something you should know, you should be looking for those situations where you can use points to get better value. So even if you have Jalen Waddle, you can trade him to a team that's winning right now, and I very rarely want to trade Jalen Waddle because there's no really reason to, unless those points and the fact that it is a young dynasty asset get me an excessively good trade fairly, right? This isn't just sell old wide receivers, it's look to benefit, if you're not a less competitive team, from points in season. Line drawn at point 3. You're a competitive team, you just lost Cooper Kupp. Right now, here's what I think is the answer. You should trade him as if he's worth 2 second-round picks, because he's not worth 3, because he's going to be 30 years old and he's injured right now. Maybe he won't come back next year, and maybe the team is worse next year, and all those risk factors that do build him to a player at an older age. Even though his age doesn't mean he's going to be worse, because the age curve is fictional, doesn't mean that risk isn't greater for anyone trading for them right now. So you devalue him a little bit, and that's fair. Looking at the DLF trade calculator, I've seen him trade for 2 first-round picks, 1 in 23, 1 in 24, multiple times. I've also seen him traded for CeeDee Lamb several times in leagues where that value is a little soft and shouldn't be. I've also seen him traded, since his injury, for Amon-Ra St. Brown and Rondale Moore. And those are all great Dynasty trades for someone with Cooper Kupp right now. Some other ones that I'm looking at are less great, like Cooper Kupp for Amari Cooper and Zay Jones. But that brings me on to point 4. If I assume for a second there isn't a lot of softness in your league, and everyone is interested in 2023 right now, and young players, because we're in a rebuild kind of a year, and production is older, and non-competitive teams, who a competitive team with Cooper Kupp is going to be looking to trade with, are not interested in trading with in a 30-year-old wide receiver who just got injured, and his team's probably worse next year, and who knows, maybe he retires. Then you have to go looking for discount trades. And if you're a competitive team, these are moves I actually try to make because I want to stay competitive. The chance to win is really important to me. And while the best Dynasty holistic strategy is always trade for value, and it is, I really don't want to underrate the potential of winning. So if you're a really strong team and you just lost Cooper Kupp, that affects you greatly. So what can you do if you can't get some of these amazing trades that everyone and the DLF Trade Finder are telling you that you should be able to get, because in your league you can't. You've made those offers, so they don't work. There are some options. Dameon Pierce, everyone knows he's going to be undervalued in the offseason. That's why he hasn't shot up into the top 5 like Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker is off the table. I think in most leagues where you're in that situation, his value is going to be off the chart. Same with Travis Etienne. Ramondre Stevenson is a fair, I hate this, straight up trade for Cooper Kupp right now. Not because Cooper Kupp isn't going to be better, or I don't want Cooper Kupp, or Cooper Kupp isn't going to be back. I don't believe in the age curve. I don't think he's going to be worse next year. So Ramondre Stevenson right now is a 16 points per game proposition. Doesn't replace Cooper Kupp, but it does a lot of it, and he's slightly younger. The other options are all more likely to be on competitive teams. Ramondre Stevenson could have found his way onto a less competitive team. So could Josh Jacobs, because of where he was drafted, or that team's just been holding on to him for a while. You might find a less competitive team with Josh Jacobs on. Those are actually fair, straight-up trades for a team that's really competing and really has a chance to win. Other options include DeAndre Hopkins, much less than the value I'm seeing in trades, and that you should actually attempt to try and get first. But DeAndre Hopkins is essentially just Cooper Kupp next year, but right now, in my opinion. That's the upside of Cooper Kupp, and essentially you're just trading them the upside, because Cooper Kupp has more upside than most wide receivers next year, if healthy, even than DeAndre Hopkins, for the points per game this year. Now, same positions trades do suck, but there are a number of them that might be possible. DeAndre Hopkins is a year older than Cooper Kupp, so you're essentially just offering to lower their points per game, which helps out their draft pick and gives you back your points per game. Or you could do it with Devontae Adams, slightly less points per game, but still well within the range, especially if he's healthy moving forward. And he's almost a year older. It's actually basically the same move, but if people just look at the broad number, then they'll think he's actually the same age as Kupp instead of the same age as, he's actually closer, if memory serves, to Hopkins than he is to Kupp. And no one else has top 5 upside that we could possibly put, top 5 upside that we could possibly put in that category. So how about an even deeper discount? And if you're a really competitive team and you really want to push for a win, there are some options. Amari Cooper. Not that top 12 upside, but it is actually is always like DJ Moore. It's always within Cooper's range of outcomes, and he's hopefully going to get an improvement at the quarterback position here to end the season. That might be a move that is fair and at least maintains or does a better job of maintaining your points per game by giving up on the upside of Cup next year to stay competitive this year. So remember, these are only discount trades I would consider in the best of situations really making a run. Another one might be Tyler Lockett, but you're probably going to need a plus on Tyler Lockett because of his inconsistency in general as a player, and also because he doesn't even have the potential of Cooper getting a better quarterback. And so I think it's fair to add a Rondale Moore, because he is actually undervalued by the market, or maybe a Josh Palmer. That's a really low ad. This is a really discount trade. Some other options include Jeff Wilson. He's put up great points over the last 2 weeks, and so has Raheem Mostert. It's probably going to become not both of them going off every week. Jeff Wilson should be worth almost nothing to anyone that's not competitive, and he could end up on a less competitive team because he was essentially a waiver wire ad, and you could add a younger wide receiver who's maybe disappointed. Jeff Wilson and Rashad Bateman, if those two players exist on a roster that's less competitive than you. Or Marcus Brown. Neither of those two do anything for your points per game right now. That would be the Jeff Wilson, and because he's accepting that both Dynasty players know what's what, gonna be worth almost nothing by the time the non-point season comes around and you're trying to trade with less competitive teams. So those are some of the ideas I've come up with and tried to throw out to my league mates so far. And again, this is a fourth point. Sometimes, and in fact most often, for old wide receivers with this level of upside, if you're rostering them, competitive or not, most league mates, especially in Dynasty, are gonna feel like, I'd rather not. And you end up holding the bag. And that's okay. I've gone over the cliff with Antonio Brown several times, and Calvin Johnson, and all the great old wide receivers that have been on my roster. Because here's the thing, a lot of times they're DeAndre Hopkins this year. A lot of times they're Devontae Adams this year. A lot of the people making fun of the idea that Kupp is going to be good anymore are the same people who said that when we drafted him highly 2 years ago. Like, that's great. You lost 2 years of having an increased advantage in points per game to win because he was too old, and now, like a broken clock, you finally got it right. Don't let it disturb you. It happens. It's unfortunate. Injuries are a part of this, and that's kind of how I try and deal with it in Dynasty when I have an older player. One last note before we get out of here, and I don't want this to sound like they should all do this for me, because again, I don't want to make moves, I don't want to suggest moves, and I don't actually want to try moves that I think are genuinely bad for whoever I'm making moves with. If you are a non-competitive team right now, every time a good player gets injured or is unavailable for other reasons, like they move to Fiji or they're Calvin Ridley, frankly, you should consider trying to get one of those discount trades. Thinking about making this video and making my notes for the points that I wanted to hit, I've actually gone and done that. In fact, it's not just Cooper Kupp. I realized I hadn't made a few offers on other players that hit those notes. So I actually just successfully made a trade for Michael Thomas, who's been forgotten about. I forgot about him. And for Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert in a best ball league. And so I think Michael Thomas, Keenan Allen fits in this category. In fact, Keenan Allen could be someone you could target whether you're competitive or not, because he might get healthy again. This definitely fallen for everyone, rightly so, again, because we haven't seen the production recently. And he's hit that category where he continues to be an increased risk of whether he will perform to his previous level or keep his job or stay in the NFL or anything else. Now, again, don't go send, if you can get him for a third round pick, sure. But I don't want to send terrible trades. Anyway, thanks very much. Let me know what you think of the video. So I'm open to suggestions. Really appreciate the comments on the last few, by the way. That was awesome. Thank you very much. And I'll see you next week. Or actually, I'll see you on Wednesday for the Dynasty Grind. Hopefully, I'll see you there.